Welcome to this year's RYA Sailability Conference, the first ever to go virtual, with more of you attending than ever from a greater number of organisations, and more than half of you attending for the first time, with a good number of international visitors as well. So we're really excited about today. I think we've got a great opportunity to spread the word about boating for disabled people and what it has to offer. So please do use social media to tell your networks about this event, tell your friends, get them to follow us, and tell them all about sailability in general. We've got a really exciting program for you today and in the next couple of weeks as well. And we're going to cover topics from restarting to safety, from complex communication to running engaging sessions on the water. Of course, I'm really grateful to Gallagher for sponsoring the event and all they do in partnership with the RYA, in a partnership with the RYA that goes back about 40 years. And they're trying to make sure that insurance products fit what we do as sailing organisations. So thank you to them. For me, 2021 is going to be the year when we regroup, we restart, I hope, and we rebuild. The last 12 months have shown the importance of sport and activity for our physical and mental health like no other. Of course, there is so much uncertainty still, and it's not as simple as the government easing the lockdown and everyone announcing a restart date. But I do believe restarting and recovering the sport has to be our focus. I take confidence from the evidence that most of the transmission of the virus happens inside, and I take confidence from the measures many of you put in place last year to make boating as safe as can be from a COVID perspective. But the last 12 months have been dominated by the pandemic, and while we've all been in the same storm, we've also been in very different boats. Workers on the front line of the NHS, people living in parts of the country with the highest transmission, ethnically diverse communities, people who've kept their jobs, those that haven't, parents homeschooling, teenagers anxious about all they're missing out on, those with good enough IT at home, those without, those able to get outside and stay active, and those who can't. So understanding each other's experience and the new barriers people may face is critical. The Activity Alliance published some research in the last couple of weeks highlighting that disabled people's lives have been the hardest hit by the pandemic. With 2/3 of deaths from coronavirus, the public health crisis is most sharply felt by disabled people. There are widening inequalities, and the pandemic has created some new ones too. People have not had the opportunity to be as active as they want, often making physical and mental health harder to manage. A fear of the virus, the impact on health, the lack of support to be active are now significant barriers for disabled people. Which is why one of the only reasonable excuses to leave your home in the current lockdown is for all outdoor organised sport for disabled people. To not do it would have had a disproportionate effect. Benefits of being active, particularly outside, are perhaps more appreciated than ever, and yet it's harder to make it happen. So with this in mind, it was really encouraging to see all the efforts to get back on the water in 2020, however limited, and all of the efforts to stay engaged with sailors and volunteers, supporting where you can, to look out for each other, to offering all the support, even when you haven't been able to go sailing. A real heartfelt thank you to everyone for everything that you've done. Now, as you signed up for this conference, we asked you what you wanted to get out of it. And it does seem like your focus is on finding out about each other's experience of the year, so that kind of regrouping thing, finding out about how to deliver safe activity again in a world shaped by the pandemic. So people are looking to restarting whenever that may be. And you also want to share thoughts and ideas and guidance on encouraging sailors and volunteers back on the water. So we do recognise there is a big rebuilding effort to be done. Of course, there are many challenges and concerns ahead. Optimism about the vaccine is one thing, but concerns about the virus remain, new variants and all. Will enough volunteers and sailors want to get back on the water? How can we rebuild confidence and competence levels following a year largely away from the water? Decision makers constantly having to review current levels of restriction and decide what is possible and how. Finding the right tone and information to persuade people to come back to sailing and volunteering again. And of course, securing funding and keeping organisations going long term. But despite all these concerns, you share a hope, a determination to get together with friends and get back on the water again. Now, my crystal ball has been rubbish this year, so I hesitate to second guess what the government are going to announce in the next week or so. But there is every chance that outdoor activity is going to be one of the first areas to come out of lockdown. And as I've said, of course, organised outdoor activity and sport for disabled people is already allowed today. But in order to restart, we have to learn the lessons of the pandemic. We can't rebuild activity without addressing the impact of COVID-19. And it's harder than ever to deliver activity safely. People are worried. So listening to disabled people about the importance of being active again, about how to overcome new barriers that they face, and to the advice and guidance they're looking for is going to be really, really important. The Sailability community will need to be as calm and reassuring as ever, full of realistic and practical ideas, and checking in that sailors and volunteers are happy with the plans that you put in place. And so that they can make a choice about when and how they get involved again. Now, not everybody has had the same opportunity to get back on the water, and more people have gone sailing where families and carers know what they're doing and can offer support, where the sailors themselves have the skills and opportunity to be independent on the water, where the sailability activity or group's got a strong collaborative relationship with a genuinely inclusive sailing club, and where sailors through their membership have had full access to facilities. So sailing clubs and centres have been under a lot of pressure this year. Decision making has been more complex. The full economic impact of the pandemic has yet to play out, and funding and income are all an increasing concern. Participants want reassurance that activity is safe, and we will do more to enable clubs and centres to strengthen safety management systems. People, particularly volunteers, are key. We can do more to share knowledge and learning so the experience on offer on and off the water is one participants want to come back to again and again. Schools, health professionals, community organisations for disabled people and other partners can really help us reach disabled people, but they've been under immense pressure with new barriers to delivering the support they want to offer. Partners are beginning to re-engage, but they will need convincing there's still a benefit to boating and reassurance that Sailability can deliver in the current climate. We've got some great local partnerships out there, but we can do more to know and understand the world our partners are operating in, to map the links that exist and increase the opportunities to get on the water. So today's conference is about sharing two perspectives. It's about the world that schools and community and health organisations are working in and the barriers and challenges they face. But it's also about sailors and their hopes and fears for the year ahead. And I'm convinced that if we put both of these at the centre of our planning and thinking, then we have every chance of breaking down some of the barriers disabled people face to get active again on the water and in a boat at some point this year. But first, our keynote speaker. To introduce Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson, I'd like to invite Rick Cassell to join me. I'm really grateful to Rick for asking Tanny if she would talk at the conference this year. Many of you will know Rick from his days sailing at Rutland, but Rick is also an elite wheelchair athlete, and his friendship with Tanny goes back many, many years, with a fair few stories to tell as a result. All I'll say is that I'm delighted that both Rick and Tanny could join us today. My one promise is that apparently Tanny has a fear of water, so please ask her as many questions as you like through the comments, but please don't ask her for a sail. She may never forgive any of us if you do. I hope there's going to be a bit of a time at the end for Tanny's talk for questions, so do put them in the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. But for the moment, Rick, you've just joined us on the screen, so over to you to introduce Tanny.
Good morning, everybody. Introducing Tanny, that's an interesting one. I've known her for a few years, shall we say. I think we go back to the 80s. We both fell in love with a sport that she was destined to become good at, and I was destined to be forever rubbish at. But, you know, that's a different story, really. I think most people know Tanny from her work at a high level with influencing disability policy and things like that. But to me, she's always been a bit of a nerd and, you know, somebody who is actually a really good friend. She's the godmother to my 3 children. So that shows you how close we are. And we used to go on holiday together. We used to call it warm weather training, but really it was just an excuse to get out of this country and go to Florida for a few weeks every spring, I mean. Joff has just touched upon the fact that Tanny has it's not a fear of water, it's just a hatred of the sickness that it induces in her. She really is hopeless when it comes to, you know, she could be sick floating in a bathtub, I think. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Tanny.
Thank you, Rick. That was really lovely. We've known each other, as you said, since the 80s, so I was always a little bit worried what the introduction might be, but it's really kind.
I thought I was
And
very kind. Yes.
you were very kind to me, so thank you. You know so much about my life, so that's lovely. And yeah, genuinely, it's one of those things where I will absolutely support and defend everybody's right to get on the water as long as it's not me. There's two things for me: is horrific motion sickness, and I'm frightened of drowning. So I'm not the best swimmer in the world. I did start off in my early teens swimming, and the highlight of my swimming career is I failed to drown. Although my mother would say it was touch and go at certain times. And I know, buoyancy aids, all those things, I know in my head they're really safe, but that never quite convinces me to get on the water. In a bizarre twist of fate, my daughter, who's now 19, who plays loads of sports, she picked canoeing and kayaking as her sport of choice, which I think is kind of payback, because what she said to me recently was that I will never get on the water and try and tell her what to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about sport, a bit about politics, and different things. And it's a really tough time for disabled people at the moment. But one of the things that I'm kind of really proud of in my career, and there's lots, and I had lots of help and support along the way to be an athlete, was actually many years ago. I did the London Marathon and did some fundraising for the RYA, and they named a lifeboat after me, and it was amazing. And we went along for the launch. My mother thought it was going to be something the size of the QE2. It was an Atlantic 75. I didn't care because I had my name on a boat. And it's actually, I think, the last time that I went on the water, where they said, "Do you want to go out?" And I said, "No, not really." And they said, "We're not going to let you drown, with the lifeboat crew." I was like, "Okay." And they let me drive my lifeboat. And I will always be grateful to them for that, and to see the amazing work that they do. I was really delighted to listen to Joff and talk about inclusion, and how disabled people can have a voice in sport, because the reality is it's always been quite difficult, and not every governing body is in the same place in terms of genuinely understanding diversity, inclusion, and wanting people to be involved. And some of the challenges that we see in terms of governing bodies is going to be hard to kind of fight. So lottery funding and support for elite level has been great, but it hasn't necessarily changed the pathway and the ability for disabled people just to have fun. And I said in front of a select committee quite a few years ago, we need to give disabled people the opportunity just to be not very good at sport, but to have fun and take time to develop. And as much as I'm passionate about the Paralympics and the pathway, we need to make sure that we have that broad base at the level. And we have ups and downs in that. And one of the things that I hope comes out of the pandemic is a rethink of physical activity and sport, and how disabled people can genuinely be involved. Now, one thing I think is always really kind of quite interesting is when people say sport and politics aren't linked. They're inextricably linked and always have been, whether it's about boycotts of games or about whether the Tokyo Games will happen or in what format will happen. And for me, transferring from sport to politics was quite a natural thing. I'm constantly asked, isn't it really difficult? And I would say there's really lovely people in politics, where if they're going to disagree with you, they will do it to your face. Certainly in the House of Lords where I sit, it's a very grown-up form of politics to work in. And I'm very privileged to have had two careers that I love so much. As Rick said, from the minute I did wheelchair racing, I knew it was the sport, but I just had to do it. I grew up in a household which was very sporty. I'm Welsh. Welsh rugby is the most important thing. I am one of those people who is completely biased, that I just want us to beat England. And that comes from my mum, who used to make us wear bobble hats and scarves. And when we were watching on TV, not even if we got to go to a live game. But what was really important in our house wasn't about the pathway. It was about being fit and active. And as a wheelchair user, I was born with spina bifida. I had to start, I was paralysed by about the age of 5. I could walk a little bit when I went to school, but then my spine collapsed and it paralysed me. Physical activity was the most important thing. And it was about being able to push my chair around. And my father refused to make our house wheelchair accessible because he said he didn't want to make it the only place that I could ever live. So I used to crawl up and down the stairs. Actually, I still do, but that's a long story. And then it was only later that sport became this huge part of my life. But I remember a massively important moment in my life. I was 7 years old. My dad was an architect, and he realised activity was important because he realised how inaccessible the world was because he helped build it. Because everything until I was born had steps and cobbles because apparently they're aesthetically pleasing. But he sat me down and he showed me this book and had pictures of the Taj Mahal and the Sydney Opera House. And he told me the world was an amazing place and I needed to travel and I needed to do things, and that I was really lucky in terms of the support I had at home, and that, I needed to kind of do something with my life. And I kind of didn't quite realise maybe what he was on about at that age. And then he sort of said, to do that, you need money. And to get money, you need a really good job. And to have a really good job, you need an education. So education was always really important in our house. And that really set an important tone for me. So my parents allowed me to try things and fail. And I was incredibly lucky they were there as a parachute to pick me up if it didn't kind of work out. And all the different sports I tried, my parents were like, oh yeah, well done, no, keep going, keep trying. I remember going to a swimming gala and being absolutely dreadful, and my dad saying, well, if you do some more training, then you come back next time, and you never know what might happen. And then it was actually 10 years ago, just after I'd ended up in the House of Lords. My dad wasn't well and we knew we didn't have much time left. And I wanted to say thank you to him for everything that he'd done, because as a child, you just think your parents are old and stupid. And I said to him, do you remember that conversation when I was 7? And he looked at me and he's like, no, I don't. I was like, don't you remember showing me the book? And he was like, no, not really. And I was like, oh, great, okay. Not going as well as I hoped. And then about half an hour later, he said to me, oh yeah, I do remember that conversation. And it's like, well, Dad, you've lost the bonding moment now. And he was sort of laughing. He went, oh yeah. He said, what did you take from the conversation? And I sort of told him, and actually all the places that he'd shown me in this book through my sporting career and other things, I'd visited those places. And I said, it was amazing. And he said, well, actually your mother and I had just been talking and we didn't want you living at home forever. Thanks, Dad. But I just recognised that through sport and through the opportunities they gave me, I had the chance to do stuff. So I went to 5 games. Seoul was my first. I was one of the last athletes to be selected on the team. That was my chance to just be at a game and see what I could do. And that was an amazing experience, to be in such a different culture and a different country. I was 19 and being in Korea when there was still a heavy American presence, and there were student riots against the games and the American presence there, and just opening my mind. At that point I'd travelled a lot in Europe, but had never been anywhere like that. And for me, it just opened my mind to what sport could do and also what the games could do. And then with each iteration of the games, ups and downs in my career, Barcelona was 4 golds and a silver and 2 world records, and Atlanta was a gold and 3 silvers. And one of my team managers told me I was a failure and I should retire. And where I've been incredibly lucky is having critical friends around me, friends who are critical, but critical friends. And I can remember coming back from Atlanta and saying, to my friends, and Rick was in Atlanta watching us compete, saying to them, what do you think I should do? And everybody said, whether you get selected for GB or not, why do you do it? And it's like, well, I do it because I love it. And yes, competing for GB was part of that, but it wasn't the be all and end all. In a year, you might only compete for GB a couple of times, but actually do loads of other stuff, which you can do without being part of a national team. And I decided to, actually I wasn't done, and I'd keep going. And Sydney was another 4 golds, and then Athens in 2004, which was my last Paralympics, were 2 gold medals. And even within that, game's ups and downs, 800 metre final, strongest event I'm beaten in many years. I made a split-second decision, which was the wrong one, and put myself behind the slowest woman in the race. And pretty hard, actually. I remember coming off the track and everybody telling me how bad I was. My team manager couldn't speak to me because his job was based on gold medals, and going to where all my friends and family were sitting. Most of them were crying, mostly thinking they could have stayed at home and saved themselves a fortune. But that was another moment when you realise the important people in your life, because actually one bad race doesn't make you a bad athlete. You know, I will always think, what if? Even if I'd run the race to the tactics I was meant to do, that doesn't give you any guarantees in what happens. But coming back and winning the 100, which was always my weakest event, was probably, for me, was the greatest race of my career in terms of, you know, getting back on track and doing things that I wanted to do. But I knew in Athens that I was done, that I wasn't going to do another Paralympics. But I had amazing advice from David Moorcroft, who said, you're a long time retired. And I did another 2 years, partly to plan transition and then to just think of other things that I wanted to do. And part of that was I was involved in the bid for the Olympics and Paralympics. I was in Singapore for the announcement. It was an incredible moment in terms of winning the games. But actually my frustration with 2012, it was an amazing moment in time. But I'm kind of slightly tired of non-disabled people telling me that 2012 changed the world for disabled people. And I always try to be polite and sort of, you know, don't say too much. But I think one of the things that lockdowns taught me in terms of the resilience that, you know, that we all need every single day is the next time somebody tells me that, I'll just say how and why. Because since 2012, however amazing it was as a moment in sporting moment in time, hate crime against disabled children has doubled, and hate crime against disabled people is on the rise. And the Crown Prosecution Service say that it's very difficult for police forces to identify it, and even when it goes to court, the additional tariff that can be applied is rarely done so. So we don't expect sport to change the world for we expect it to have an influence. But if somebody stood up and said sport changed, 2012 changed the world for women, then they would be slightly ignored. But there is something very strange at the moment that people are able to say that about disabled people. And, you know, where we are in terms of the figures that have been released, it is a really, really difficult time for disabled people. So the question is, did I ever think I was going to end up in the House of Lords? Not really, if I'm truthfully honest. I actually did a politics degree at university. I went to Loughborough, that great seat of political learning. Actually, the degree there was really good. But I had no intentions at 21 to go into politics. And I remember saying to my head of department, I am never going into politics because that's for losers. And when I ended up in the House of Lords, somebody from my department just sent me an email and just said, "Dear Tanny, loser." That's the thing they remember about me at Loughborough. But in my time in sport, I became, you know, really interested in disability rights, and I found out about the social model and disability and, you know, athlete welfare and how athletes were treated, and just it just sort of built up and up and up. And so when I had the chance to be in the Lords, you kind of grasp it with both hands. So to be a crossbencher, there's an interview process. And it's the strangest interview in my life. The first question I was asked was, what's the most interesting debate you've ever listened to in the House of Lords? We do things that are very technical. And I remember coming out of the interview and just saying to my husband, I have no idea how that went. Like, just 2 hours, really, really difficult 2 hours. And just, they don't, if you don't get in, they don't necessarily tell you. They can keep you on file for quite a long time. And it was a couple of months, and I was at the point where I was thinking, okay, this hasn't happened. And I was working on the 2012 games, and it's lots of other things that I was doing. And the way that I found out, it was a Tuesday night. Karis had come home from school and said that she needed green felt for tomorrow. She said at 7:30 at night, not at 4 o'clock when she came home. We'd rushed off to the local shopping centre. We're in the local Hobbycraft. I'm screaming like a banshee because she's looking at something else. It's 5 to 8. They're shutting at 8 o'clock. And I think Ian and I then had a row about me shouting at Karis. And I look at my phone and it said on Friday at 10 o'clock it'll be announced you're going into the House of Lords. I showed Ian and he said, come the revolution, you're added to the list of people I'll get rid of. I rang my dad, who said, well, it's still not a proper job, but I knew when you were 21 that's what you were going to do, so I expected nothing less of you. Thanks, Dad. And then he said, before you get excited, make sure they've got the right Tanny Gray Thompson. Bit of an unusual name, Dad, so I think I'm okay. And I thought I'd done an amazing job because Karis was like, why are you excited? And I explained to her what I was going to do. And she said, can I tell my teacher on Friday? I went, yeah, you can. And I picked her up from school on Friday and a teacher said, well done on your job, but, you know, a bit of a shame that you've got to work in London. But if you work really, really, really hard, you might be able to get promoted back to Darlington. I said, what did Karis tell you I was going to do? And I'd said to Karis, remember when we went to Westminster and we came out of the tube station, we handed our tickets in and we went to Westminster, that's where Mummy's going to work. And she told her teacher I had a job collecting tickets at Westminster tube station. I was like, thanks for that. So when I explained to her teacher what I was actually going to do, she's like, oh, okay. But it's a chance to do things. And the reality is the stuff that I work on is really hard. You know, people either like me or hate me for the stuff I do. I get treated three ways. Once as an ex-athlete, which is generally quite nice. Once as a parliamentarian, people either like you or hate you. And then the third way is a disabled woman, where I experience my sort of highest level of discrimination. But I work on things like welfare reform and benefits and support and legal aid. We're working on domestic abuse at the moment and domestic abuse for disabled people and trying to get disabled people more explicitly included in the legislation. And there are amazing carers out there, but there are also carers who don't support disabled people in the way that they should. And it's pretty tough at the moment because, you know, the pushback is that if we include disabled people in domestic abuse legislation, we might as well include lodgers, which is a bit of a strange link. But it's our job. And I think what sports taught me is some of the resilience to keep going. And it's hard and it's difficult at times. During the welfare reform bill, I had an amazing group of disabled people on the outside who watched every single minute of the debate and were sending me questions and papers and information and being there to support me. And I remember one night leaving about 2 o'clock in the morning and I hadn't had anything to eat because we'd just been in the chamber since 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember tweeting and said, look, bit of a tough day with welfare reform. Does anyone know of a takeaway open between Parliament and where I was staying at the time? And I had people offering to bring me pizza to Pierce Entrance. And when I got back to the block of flats that I was then staying in, somebody had left a cheese sandwich outside my door. And you just go, that is amazing. People are absolutely amazing at times. But the challenge for disabled people, I think in many ways it's got harder in the last 8 to 10 years rather than better. And while we sort of slightly bury our heads in the sand about 2012, we're going to struggle to change the view because sport, massively important, still one of the most important things in my life. But we have to be quite realistic about the challenges. The employment gap for disabled people is twice the national average. Many companies don't measure disability pay gap because there's not enough disabled people to measure. And I did an interview last night on Newsnight about COVID, and one of the things that's got most traction on social media, as I said just before lockdown, I've been going on the tube and it was rush hour and someone said, can you travel when it's more quiet because people have got important jobs to go to? And I'd given a slightly, what I thought was a funny answer, which was, yeah, I'm off to Westminster to defeat the government, I'm moving into number 10 and I'm going to become a dictator. And then the individual said, yes, but can you travel when it's more quiet? That's the day-to-day reality. And the pandemic has kind of added to the complexity of those things. People living with disabilities between 18 and 34 are 30 times more likely to die of COVID. As Geoff said, 60% of disabled people have a disability, have died. The figure last year, people were asking me, am I shocked by the figures? And I was like, no, I'm not, because the figures in November last year were out. We knew after the first lockdown that it was 30% and that it was going to rise. So we have to find ways, because I genuinely believe physical activity is part of our recovery for everybody. In the middle of a global health pandemic, we have to think about how disabled people and how people can be active. The Activity Alliance data isn't, again, really a surprise, but we have to use this moment to have a different discussion about the importance of physical activity in everyone's lives. Sport is a microcosm of physical activity, but we have to use this opportunity. We know in the gym and leisure sector, I chair a not-for-profit, it's a membership body for the fitness sector, health sector, it's called UK Active, that in when gyms were allowed open after first lockdown, there was less than one case in 100,000 in gyms and leisure provision. And then we know that outdoor provision is even safer. It's really difficult at the moment. The dispensation that was given for disabled people to exercise, really good, but there are such difficult decisions to take in terms of health and safety and protecting people. I've had some contact this week from different groups who desperately want to get back on the water, and trustees are saying no. I'm really happy to have that conversation beyond here. But trustees are in a difficult position in terms of protecting people. What I would say is what you want is trustees protecting people because it's the right thing to do, rather than being from a paternalistic and a slightly ableist view. The disabled people can't make decisions for themselves about what they do. But that's the subject of a whole another discussion. I could spend the next 2 hours talking about that. But I think what we have to be thinking is actually disabled people being more demanding about their right to be physically active and their right to get into provision, and their right to be able to do it, and their right to be good or not good, or just have fun and just sail when the weather's nice or sail when the weather's not nice. But we've got to get over this sort of ableism and paternalistic view that exists within society. There's a government's strategy coming out, which we're expecting at the end of March. I have no idea what's in it, but I kind of hope that there's employment and education and physical activity that's part of that. If there's not, then I'll need everyone's support who's on the line today to be arguing why physical activity for disabled people should be part of a strategy, because it's a way that we can get people fit, active, costing the NHS less money, thinking about all those things that we need to do. So we'll be on the lookout for that. We're expecting a roadmap in a couple of weeks in terms of, hopefully the end of February actually, in terms of a clearer outline of what's going to happen for physical activity for disabled people. And again, if disabled people aren't kind of explicitly mentioned in that, I think there's a piece of work to do. But ultimately, I'm actually, for all the really difficult stuff that I've just talked about, I am optimistic, because what I've seen is disabled people becoming more vocal and talking about this in a bigger and a stronger way. And actually, we are stronger together. We can do a huge amount of things, but actually, I think we can learn a lot from the campaign in the 70s and 80s in terms of the voice of disabled people. And I think we have to learn from that, and we have to get back to some of those days to actually demand our right to be included in society in a really positive way. I'm going to stop talking there, because if there were medals for talking, I would win. And Rick has experience of how much I can talk. So thank you very much for listening today. My email address, if anyone would like to get in touch with me directly, is graythompsont@parliament.uk. We don't have any office staff in the Lord, so it's just me answering. But if anyone's got any questions they want to raise directly with me, please get in touch. I'll be delighted to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Can't hear Joff.
Annie, that was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for all your insight. Thank you for your challenges. And thank you for all your efforts over the years as well. But that was absolutely brilliant. We have got a few minutes for some questions. And I've got a couple that people posed us towards as they were registering for the conference, really. And I guess it's around that, that challenge we're all facing at the moment, that yes, organised sport for disabled people is possible. So yes, we could all go sailing today or tomorrow if the weather was a bit warmer, if we wanted to. But actually, there are some real challenges into making that happen. And I mean, you touched on the organisational perspective there, and that duty of care that trustees have got to everybody involved, to the participants and all of their volunteers, and that disabled people's voice saying, actually, I would really like to go sailing, and to be honest, I think it's safer than going to the supermarket at the moment. And how do we balance those two things?
It's really difficult because on the one hand, I would be fighting tooth and nail for disabled people to have the opportunity to be active, and you would, but actually everybody has to agree in terms of the health and safety. And I'm a trustee on a number of different things, and we're making really tough decisions because ultimately, who's responsible if something happens? Safeguarding health and safety, other things like that. It's really hard. But I think we have to do more in terms of listening to disabled people. I think there's things we can do in terms of bubbling, and whoever realised that was going to be a word that we'd talk so much about. And I think we have to allow people to take an amount of personal responsibility and personal decision making in terms of what they do. The difficulty, with the sport that's is reliant on volunteers. In terms of if people need help and support, it's joining those things. I think actually it's about having just really sensible grown-up conversations, and staying away from the paternalistic attitude that disabled people and others can't make decisions. But there's no easy answers in this. And as a crossbencher, my job is always to be against the government, whichever government is in power. My job is to challenge them and disagree with them. But no one's had any experience. There's paper exercises of running a pandemic are nothing like they are in the real world, and we do have lessons. There are lots of lessons to learn, but at what point and having the capacity to learn the lessons is going to be really difficult.
Absolutely. And I guess the other side of that question and that equation then is, you're someone who loves to be active. We had Emily from Banbury Club ask us, what can clubs and volunteers do to help people feel safe coming back to boating? So what's going to make you feel safe getting back to being active again? And
well, for me, a lot of my activity is based on going to the gym. So after first lockdown, it was amazing in terms of how the sector stepped up in terms of separating equipment and cleaning and distancing, and it was just fab to be back in the gym and talking to a lot of the older women who swim there, what a massive impact it made for them. It's the mental health and well-being, it's just being able to see other people, it's all those different things. And I think for me it's about just making sure that other people, the bit I do worry about going out day-to-day life, and I'm not shielding, I don't have any underlying health conditions, it's people not being daft and coming near me. That's the bit I worry about, which is really difficult to kind of explain, that people don't suddenly start thinking they can help me when I don't actually want it, or people people just don't often see wheelchair users. The number of times pre-pandemic where people would walk into me or lean over me in a supermarket, it's those are the sorts of things that I worry about. So when people are close to me, I just cough. Actually, I mean, it's really bad. I mean, I've got quite a dark sense of humour. Or the last time I went out and someone came very, very close to me, I just said, I don't think my taste has come back yet. And I know I shouldn't joke about it, but sometimes like the daily resilience you need, I struggle to find ways to deal with it. I always use humour anyway. When I used to get people saying, people like you can't do that. It all comes with a pointy finger. You can't do that. I go, what Welsh people? What do you mean disabled? So that's my own personal coping strategy, because otherwise I'd scream at people and swear, which is not really constructive. So I think, it is difficult for people to make decisions. I know a lot of disabled people who aren't shielding, who are really worried about going back out, because of everybody else. And I think one thing we have to just think about in terms of people who can wear masks or not, just there's quite a bit of nastiness around at the moment about wearing masks or not. Or people say, no, I can't wear a mask, and like, can you really, just people who the sort of the anti-vaxxers and the people who think that COVID's not a real thing. We need to do quite a lot on education in terms of that. So it's coming out of this is not going to be easy. It's going to be a couple of years. It's not going to be this summer. I don't believe that. I think it will change, but it's not going to be quick.
Absolutely. And yeah, I take three things from that: some grown up conversations, be nice to each other, and don't be idiots. And if we remember those three simple rules, we'll make a path through this one way or another. Tanny and Rick, thank you so much. That's been absolutely brilliant. We are going to take a short break now, and so we're going to see everyone again at 10:30 for the first of our two discussion panels, which are going to pick up on all of these themes. So I'm really excited about the first one. I genuinely believe if we're going to restart and rebuild activity this year, we have to understand the world that our partners are operating in, and the challenges they face and the barriers they face and the risk assessments they're having to write and all those things. So we're going to be joined by a number of organisations to listen to the world that they're operating in at the moment and some of their ideas for overcoming those barriers. So go and put the kettle on, and we will see you again at 10:30. Rick, Tanny, thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant.
Cheers, Joff.
We want you to become a member of the RYA. But what do we do with your membership fee? When you become a member, your membership fee contributes to a whole host of RYA activities. Our legal team lobby government on your behalf. Any issue that's relevant to boaters, safety, access restrictions, red diesel, Brexit, wind farms, you name it, we'll be representing your best interests. Your membership helps fund initiatives like the Green Blue, working to keep our waters clean and protect the marine environment. By joining, you support the RYA training programme, providing safe structure courses to over 25,000 instructors who then teach and inspire anyone wanting to get out on the water. You help us encourage kids, adults, disadvantaged, able and disabled sailors from all parts of the UK to start boating, as well as providing support to sailing clubs and centres to help grow our sport. Your membership also supports the competitive side of sailing and windsurfing in the UK, from youth to Olympic level, helping nurture future champions. In return for your support, we can offer you all sorts of benefits, ranging from expert legal advice, technical knowledge, career development and certification, as well as a whole host of exclusive offers and discounts on everything, from insurance and holidays to kit and equipment, helping to cut the cost of your boating. You'll also receive a quarterly magazine, so you can be at the heart of boating. Your membership really matters. Our combined size makes us representative, influential and a force to be listened to. Our membership income funds so much of what our departments deliver in protecting and promoting your safe, successful and rewarding boating. Like you, we care passionately about boating.
What do you think your life would be like if you didn't have sailing in it?
I'd probably be very bored. Whilst I may not be able to run around at the moment, I can get around really easily in a boat, do what I want to do and be very independent doing it. It's always a laugh, and like I said, it's sociable, so can't really see any downsides to it apart from when it rains. I think my favourite thing about sailing is it's quite a calm sport, so I'm able to go out on the water and forget about having to constantly think about how I'm going to get around and plan things. I could do a race if I want to, but I can also quite easily just potter around on the water and forget worrying about hospital appointments or any other worries that day to day. I would say I've probably made the majority of my friends through sailing. It's a really social sport. Whilst you can sail by yourself, there's nothing better than actually sailing as part of a team and really working together and enjoying yourselves. I've always been of the opinion that you should never let fear of doing something stop you from giving something a try. Sailing is amazing to me because I'm able to be more independent, I can be sociable, I can be competitive, and it's so much more than sailing.
Welcome back. I hope you've refilled your cups and we're ready to go again. As I said before the break, it's really vitally important that we understand the challenges that local schools, community organisations of disabled people and health organisations and all the challenges they're facing, because they're going to be key to really understanding, reaching and reassuring disabled people that boating is a great experience and something we can offer again. So don't forget, if you've got questions for the panel that's just about to happen, please put them in the comments on Facebook and the YouTube stream and get them in there early, because then we've got more chance of getting them to the panel. But I'm absolutely delighted that Frank Fletcher has agreed to chair this panel discussion. Frank is the Chief Executive of the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, and he lives and breathes partnerships. So just this week, he signed a three-way partnership with Click Sargent and the Teenage Cancer Trust, charting a way for the three organisations to collaborate really deeply. So he's all over partnerships, Frank. He's also 50 tomorrow, so happy birthday for tomorrow, Frank.
Thank you, Jeff.
To you to introduce the rest of the topic and the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much. And can I just say thanks so much for inviting me to do this job. Really excited, and it's great to be working with Sailability. That ad we've just seen is a young person who sails with a Sailability group and also sails with the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust, which is just a great example of working together. So loved the first keynote speech this morning, absolutely fantastic. And I'm really hoping that this panel can really build on some of the themes that have been talked about already this morning and what this conference is all about. So we're joined, I'm going to let the full panel members introduce themselves, but we're joined by Liddy, Steve, Richard and Helen. And hopefully over the next half an hour, we can really, build on those questions that we've all got about how we get back, how we rebuild, how we restart. So Liddy, can I pass over to you to just introduce yourself first, and then we'll go to Steve, Richard and Helen, if that's okay. So over to you, Liddy, for a quick introduction.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Really good to be here today. So my name's Liddy. I work for Disability Rights UK as project manager for our Get Yourself Active programme. So Get Yourself Active is a programme that's funded by Sport England, and we aim to reduce the barriers that disabled people face when accessing physical activity. We work alongside disabled people and disabled people's user-led organisations to lead change in the social care, health and sport sectors. And this is all to kind of support people to get active in a way that's right for them and to improve health and well-being outcomes. So there's a number of different projects that we're working on as part of the programme. For example, just to name a few, influencing social care and health professionals to have conversations about physical activity, influencing social workers so that they're able to gain the knowledge and skills to prescribe physical activity to disabled people. And we're also working to influence the sports sector so that they're able to work with disabled people to co-produce solutions to inactivity. And this includes the rolling out of co-production workshops. As well as this, there's some other bits of work we're involved in. For example, we did a recent research project to find out how disabled people have been staying active during the pandemic. And we've led on creating resources to support disabled people to be active at home. And we're also working with Sport England to deliver TIF funding to various organisations who deliver physical activities to disabled people and have been hit by the pandemic. So this funding is to help them to kind of continue to deliver these activities.
Thanks, Liddy. That's great. So Steve, over to you for a quick intro.
Morning, everyone. So my name's Steve McFadden. I work for Alzheimer's Society, so I'm the Senior Officer for Physical Activity. So for those that don't know, Alzheimer's Society is a national health charity. So we're the leading dementia charity that provides information, support, advice. We kind of look at how we can improve care for people affected by dementia. We fund research, and ultimately we try and create lasting change for people affected by dementia. So that is Alzheimer's disease, but all other types of dementia as well. With my work specifically, so my focus over the next 2 years is to really look at how we can build and learn from the evidence that's out there, find new insight by working with people affected by dementia, to look at and build the foundations for how we can in the future provide kind of more opportunities for them to be more physically active, give them ideas and creative solutions for finding ways that they can build physical activity into their day-to-day lives. And similar to what Liddy was saying, looking at the barriers and looking at testing solutions on how we can do that so that they can be more active and enjoy a better quality of life with their dementia diagnosis.
Steve, Richard, over to you.
Morning, everybody. My name's Richard. I'm lead of adventurous activities at a independent specialist residential school in Lincolnshire. So I work with people with severe learning difficulties, autism and severe communication difficulties. So my background's in developing communication. I'm a Makaton tutor and a dinghy instructor, powerboat instructor. We sail with Lincoln District Sailing Association in Highcombe, who affiliate Highcombe Sailing Club. I'm here really today sort of to add a school perspective, but obviously as a residential school, I see it's slightly different maybe to a mainstream school, but we've certainly got an appetite to re-engage with our extended curriculum.
Thanks, that's great, Richard. So Helen, last but by no means least, a quick introduction.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me along. I'm Helen Mason and I run Freewheeling Inclusive Dance. We're based here in Birmingham. And so what do? We run dance classes for people with disabilities, adults and children. And a lot of the people that come are wheelchair users. Not that other people can't come. That's just kind of the way it is. We focus a lot on wheelchair dancing. And currently, obviously, since March 2020, we've moved online. So we're doing all our classes right now online, and we're offering 4 classes a week. And I'm just here to kind of represent my group because they've started doing sailability classes with you.
And that's great to hear. That really is. So thank you for those instructions. And I think, as Josh said, this will be a really useful session to hear from different perspectives about how we go into a post-COVID world. So I suppose that leads on nicely to question 1, which is, how have your beneficiaries been affected through COVID, and what barriers do you face getting back on the water? And we'll try and make this more of a conversation, but perhaps I can come to you first, Steve, and maybe you can just cover off, how people have been, how your beneficiaries have been effective, and what barriers you're going to face getting back on the water.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to say I wish I brought Helen's energy into my first introduction. That would have been much better. So something to learn from Helen there. I think for our group, so we support people affected by dementia. So by that we mean people living with dementia and also carers. And it has been a really tough year for people. There's the general things that I think will affect a lot of different groups. So in terms of a loss of stimulation, that lack of social contact that people have been missing, a lack of engagement due to kind of lockdown measures, but also services, activities, groups and things like that stopping. And often we found that those groups and those activities that people love doing have been a lifeline for people when living with dementia and other conditions. But some of the more specifics I think that people have had challenges with over the last year. So we've been doing a lot of research and insight with people living with dementia. Right at the start of lockdown, people were really worried about losing kind of basic abilities like speech and things, and they were starting to notice that because they weren't interacting as much with people as they previously were, they were kind of losing these functions that were quite daily functions that they would usually be fine with, and that obviously led to a massive drop in confidence and motivation for people, which is I think confidence and motivation have been a massive thing right across the board for people. I guess people worried about the future. They kind of worried that will they be able to get back to where they were before the lockdown measures were in place? If they were able to kind of use public transport independently, will they still be able to do that? So there's a lot of worries and kind of heightened anxieties, I guess, around what does the future look like for them? And also people have kind of mentioned to us, like, will they get left behind when everything goes back to normal and things start going back to activities and back to sessions? Will they be left behind and not kind of included and involved in those kind of restart of activities? So yeah, they're just a couple of things I think from us that we've kind of noticed over the last year, but I'm sure some of the conversations will be very similar for other conditions that people support as well.
Great, thanks, Steve. That's a really good oversight. I don't know which panel member would like to go next and add to that. I'll have to pick someone if not.
Helen, I don't mind.
Go on, Lily. Thank you.
Sorry, got to go first.
It's harder on a screen than sitting in a group of people.
It's not quite as natural, is it?
Absolutely, but go on, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to build on what Steve said, really, about kind of the people being scared. Kind of coronavirus has kind of heightened that anxiety that people are feeling, and we already know that disabled people face a lot of barriers when it comes to accessing physical activity, and we're finding now that kind of one of those main barriers is coronavirus and the resulting fear that causes people. So I mentioned briefly in my introduction, we were part of a research project looking at how disabled people have been staying active during the pandemic, and kind of finding out their experiences. And that was something that came out of our research as well, is people were scared. And also we spoke to people when restrictions were starting to ease last summer, but we found that people we're still really worried about going out and exercising in groups again, even as, you know, restrictions were starting to ease. And I think this is something that's going to kind of continue for a while. I think, you know, even when things start to get better, there's still going to be that fear from people, and there's still going to be people kind of wanting to stay active at home, maybe for a little bit longer. So yeah, that's definitely something we've found as well.
That's really useful. Helen, how have you found it with your group? I mean, we talked briefly before this session, and you know, you actually came to sailing almost because of COVID. So
yeah,
which is, you know, so but where's your group now? And
well, so I think that obviously the main barrier for us is the majority of the group have been in the shielding category, and a lot of them in the highly vulnerable category. So I don't think it's too dramatic to actually say a lot of them haven't really like gone out for a year, like maybe out for a little whiz around the block, but a lot of them, you know, they're not getting out. They can't go out. They don't want to go out for fear, you know, of becoming unwell. So I think the main issue has been like the social isolation, you know, because we'd meet each other sometimes twice a week, you know, we'd have a good chat, and there's all that, isn't the surrounding sport. It's not just doing the physical activity itself, it's the meeting up with people, having a chat before, maybe grabbing a cup of tea afterwards. It's all that kind of stuff. So that has been the biggest concern for me and the group, is just everyone's mental health and not getting to see one another and being completely isolated. So yeah, the reason Sailability kind of came up for us was to sort of solve that problem, because we're obviously online, which is great, and we're getting to see each other and keep active as much as we can in our small bedrooms, you know, but it's not the same as being together. So when we were offered the Sailability sessions in Birmingham, once lockdown had kind of eased over the summer, we jumped at the chance, because we were like, yes, we want to get out there and see one another. And it provided that safety as well, because everyone's in separate boats, we're in small groups, we're not close together, which would have been a problem if we couldn't have gone back to the hall and gone and done dance, because we were too close together. The hall's too small, but being out boating, you've got all that space, you know, and actually that kind of resolved some of our issues. And now we're back on lockdown again. We're going back round the loop again of being like, please let us back on the water, basically.
Absolutely. And Richard, just before I come to you, maybe I could just add to that. We've had a lot of the young people that we work with at the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust who've been shielding, and you know, that whole how people come out of this having shielded for, you know, some people most of the year is really, really tough. And I think we are all organisations, whatever we do, whoever we are, that work with people who have been shielding, we have a huge amount of work to do in the future, and we need to be gearing ourselves up for that work now, because it really is going to be, there is a second crisis is going to be a different crisis, but we need to be there for it. Sorry, Richard, I butted in there. I was about to come to you, so apologies.
Yeah, no problem. No, I mean, it's similar themes really. I mean, as a residential school, we've obviously got a lot of staff teams, educational staff teams, but also support staff teams going in and out of the school. So our primary concern has obviously been to minimise the spread of an outbreak, and for the health of the people we support, really. So we have the young people really have been on site, probably for the best part of a year, like Helen said, and you know, that creates, you know, a lot of challenges, because we do really miss meaningful activity, and you know, our community presence is really important. You know, and boating brings, you know, that physical activity, that social interaction, but also, you know, a lot helps to meet people's sensory needs, and no, like you say, it's really, really important. I know that's caused I suppose frustration for a lot of the young people, and you know, sort of diminished sort of quality of life, and you know, confidence, and you know, their sort of world's been quite restricted. And thinking at it from the Sailability Centre's point of view, obviously a lot of volunteers are shielding, as well as obviously our senior instructor, bosun, was initially furloughed, and it has been quite a challenge to think about re-engaging. Yeah.
Thanks all. And I suppose just before we move on to the next question, is there anything any of you want to add, having heard the other panel members share their experiences? I think it's a story we're hearing lots. So when Joff asked me to do this, I was slightly surprised, and then and obviously said yes straight away, because one of the things that I've always been impressed with around sailability groups is that they are so good at removing barriers. That's what Sailability do so well, and that's all of the sailability groups do so well. So I suppose the second question is around how can sailability groups reduce and remove the barriers that COVID has presented? And then a little bit like Helen, listening to you talk about the fact that you've come to sailing because of COVID. What opportunities does a post-COVID world present? So I think that would be the two questions, and maybe I can go to you. Who'd like to go first on this one? Maybe I could. That's great, Liddy. Thank you. So Liddy, how can sustainability groups reduce and remove the barriers COVID has presented, and what opportunities does a post-COVID world present?
I think firstly, because it's sometimes easy to focus on the negatives that the pandemic's brought about, but also it's important to think about the fact that there have been quite a lot of positives around that have come about. So for example, it's highlighted where we can work quickly to create more inclusive conditions for everyone. There's been a lot of organisations collaborating, sharing resources with each other, and working to create more opportunities for disabled people. So I think if we can continue to build on that, when the pandemic's come to an end, that will be really positive for people. And I think the question you said around reducing the barriers that COVID's brought about, the most important thing is having those conversations with disabled people. So now is that really great time to be able to engage with people and really co-produce with disabled people. Because you're never really going to truly know what people want until you start having those conversations and work together with the people you're working with. And so it could be really simple things you can put in place to reduce those barriers. For example, providing extra safe sessions to re-engage with people, but involving disabled people in those decisions, and involving them in the design and delivery as we go back to normal. Will really make sure we come out of the crisis stronger, and means we can really work together in partnership. So yeah, I'd say that's really important, is working really closely with disabled people now, so that when things go back to normal, you're really creating those more inclusive environments, really going off what disabled people have told you that they want as activities start to return to normal.
I think that's so important, Liddy, and I claim no credit for it. It was entirely the team at the Trust. But at the beginning of COVID this time last year, we moved online. And one of the things I was most impressed with the team is that they went out to the young people that we worked with and said, what do you want us to deliver? Now we can't deliver what we normally do. And as I say, I claim no credit. It was the team that did that. But that was such an important stage in the process of responding to COVID, and I think it's such an important stage as we now respond to hopefully the post-COVID or the post-pandemic world. Who'd like to add to that? Who go on, Helen, and then we'll come to Steve.
Yeah, I was going to totally agree actually with what Liddy said, and that just to ask. Like sometimes it's something so simple and you forget, but if you just ask the people you are working with and just say, what would work for you, what wouldn't work, and just say Phil, our instructor, Phil, at the Midlands Sailing Club, that's been working with our group, he was so great at checking in with their anxieties about what they did and didn't want to do. And for some sessions, he'd just say, look, if you just want to come and just watch, if you don't feel ready to go out on the water yet, if you just want to come and observe and see what we do, that's absolutely fine. And he'd take away all that kind of stress and worry and anxiety about maybe doing something if they weren't quite ready, and the whole group were just like, oh, that makes me feel so much better, that there's no kind of expectation, but also checking in with those kind of anxieties that we're going to have for a while, aren't we, about COVID, and whether people do feel ready or not ready, and you'll find that different people react differently. You know, I've got members of my group that are like ready to go right now, let's go, and then others that are like, oh, let's hang on a bit, let's wait and see, and it's checking in with that as well. And also, obviously, with different people now getting the vaccine, I think that creates for some people a new confidence or maybe a bit of reassurance, and again, that's going to be completely different for each individual. So I'd agree with what you were saying, and just ask the individuals.
Yeah, and I'm sure Richard and Steve will add to this, but I think that thing about some people feeling really, some people feeling really ready to, to get back, and some people feeling really anxious is something we've seen. And I think the vaccines as well, we're now seeing a number of young people who are extremely clinically vulnerable get their vaccines. So, the vaccine rollout is coming. Sorry, Steve, over to you. I know you had your hand up as well.
Very similar comments. I guess just building on it, that meaningful consultation is kind of vital, really, and kind of understanding. And Helen mentioned the word reassurance as well. That is a massive thing for a lot of people, and understanding that if you have had groups come into your sessions previously, that actually their circumstances, their needs, their abilities might have changed quite a lot over the last year, and having that patience to support people. And yeah, like the social side of these groups is arguably more important than the activity for a lot of people, and whether that's getting them out on the water or just being in the environment, enjoying being in a different environment. I think there is a big opportunity with, like I said, there will be the people at different stages and some willing to come and others maybe not quite ready yet. But for the ones that are, it's a huge opportunity to kind of bring back that misconnection that people have missed out on over the last year. And you guys have brilliant. I was lucky enough to go to a sailability session, was dragged onto the water, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think people generally, that kind of thing that they're looking for can be offered by the sailability group. So I think it would be to keep doing what you're doing and keep asking people what they want and going with the flow with them.
Thanks, Steve. Rich, over to you.
Yeah, again, I sort of concur with everything that everyone says about, involving everyone, getting this holistic view of what moving forward might look like. Just trying a different perspective, really. I suppose myself oversees a program of activity in terms of being really proactive with the risk assessment and being prepared. Because obviously we don't know, the timescales, and obviously we expect another announcement from Boris, sort of, I think it's 22nd of February. But COVID is a huge risk, and obviously it gives a lot of concern. But as you said, we are great at overcoming barriers and mitigating risk. And if we can do a risk assessment and just sort of highlight what are those risks that COVID brings to the table, and then look at practical solutions. And just how we do things differently, in terms of, how we maybe disinfect things, or how we quarantine boats, or what do we do with different boats, or, do we do different bubbles, or do we train staff differently, or do we use different transport? And just to be really creative in our thinking, I think, we can be ready to go. And then hopefully that will offer a level of reassurance to people that they can actually see that these risks are sort of mitigated to a level we can be comfortable with, because as a sailability group, like you said, this is our bread and butter, really, isn't it, in terms of risk around man handling, and risk around capsize, and risks around all sorts of things. And how we manage those is to sit back and be creative and come up with a solution. And I am enthusiastic that with a bit of creative thinking here, that we can get straight back on the water, and we're probably ready. From a school perspective, I think we might be a little bit ahead of the curve. We are being laterally flow tested, and we have had the vaccine, and we are a bubble. We have got established bubbles, and perhaps we are, because we have got trained staff, we may be a little bit ahead. But yeah, I just think it's about the planning stage as well, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that the that Sailability are good at overcoming. Joff, I'm hoping you're there. I'm not sure that we have time for any questions, as we've got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Well, I was just going to pick up on Richard was saying there, because we've had lots of questions both before and actually also during the conference, around, particularly around schools, because lots of Sailability groups work with schools. And how much, Richard, how much do you think schools are going to prioritise kind of classroom activities, or are they actually looking to get back involved in outdoor activity? And what are the biggest barriers they face? I know you said you're a residential school, so you might have a slightly different perspective, but what's your sense of kind of schools for people with disabilities and what they're looking to do?
I think generally, in outdoor education as a whole, obviously just gauging what's on Facebook and talking to the schools and other colleagues in other schools, there is an appetite to re-engage. Obviously, the extended curriculum is really important to schools, and I know there's a lot of residential activity centres are really concerned that they've been hit quite a lot in the last year, and maybe overnight stays won't look the same. But people are looking for activities in the day, and I think that as soon as people do consider things to be safe, I think there'll be a surge of this. Outdoor activity will be one of the first things to come back onto the table, won't it? In terms of before pubs and a lot of the hospitality, and I am encouraged, and there's a lot of people out there are being flexible. One of my main accreditation streams, the Duke of Edinburgh, and using sailing as a mode of travel. And of course, the Duke of Edinburgh have been really flexible in terms of what those expeditions look like. I think everybody is starting to adapt, and yeah, I think if through partnership working, I do think there is an appetite to get back out there.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think lots of the comments and lots of the questions are picking up on this, the need to rebuild confidence and to rebuild motivation. And actually, as you've all recognised, people, lots of people have been very anxious about the virus, might not have left home too much. And perhaps directly a question for you, Frank. Your organisation works with people who are recovering from cancer. So what are you doing to kind of rebuild their confidence in time for when you can go back out on the water again?
So I think that, and if there was one takeaway for people to take away from this session, for me, it would be, as a lot of the panel members have said, talk to the people that you work with. And I think the answer to overcoming those concerns, and for a lot of our young people, quite completely understandable concerns, and for lots of the groups that Sailability work with, completely understandable concerns. But I think the big thing is talk to the people that you work with, and talk to them and reassure them, and find out from them what is going to make them feel happy to come back. And I think also people are individuals. We are going to have young people who desperately want to come back and have had the vaccine, and we're going to have young people who are at the bottom of the ladder for the vaccine and may not even get the vaccine and may be very nervous, and everything in between. I think it's all about talking to the groups, to the people, to the individuals that you work with, and asking them what the barriers are. And I'll come back next year, Geoff, and let you know how it went and whether that worked.
Brilliant. Guys, that was a fantastic conversation, and I agree that that's absolutely my takeaway. Just ask, what's going to work for you, and check in with people's anxieties. Don't pretend they don't exist, because they absolutely do exist. So check in with them, ask, and find out what would work with you. That's brilliant, and it's almost as if you directly link to our next session. So we've got the next session has got a whole load of sailors talking about their experiences, their concerns, what 2020 was like, and what also they're hoping for 2021. So just tuning into exactly what people want. But that guys, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Frank, Liddy, Helen, Richard, and Steve. That was really good. Thank you for your time. Helen, I love the fact that you found sailing because it was better and easier this year than being in a hall. So I just think that's a great story. Guys, we've got another break now. Time to make another cup of tea. Frank, I think you deserve a 50th size glass of champagne. Have a great day tomorrow. And we'll see you all soon somewhere along the way. So we are starting. Cheers, guys. So we're starting again at 11:30, everyone. And we know that Sailability didn't happen did happen last year, even in limited ways. We know that one of the factors that made it happen was sailors being able to voice how important activity was to them, what they needed to make sure it was, how to stay safe. So the next panel are going to explore why boating's so important, the barriers they face now, and the hopes and fears for the season ahead. So we'll see you all at 11:30. Thanks, guys.
I'm Ben Bennett, RYA Account Manager for Gallagher, and I'm delighted to be here at this weekend's virtual conference on behalf of Gallagher as proud sponsor of the event. You will find my contact details at the end of this short video. Now, clubs, training centres and affiliated organisations face a diverse range of risk exposures, often requiring complex insurance programmes. Gallagher have operated as the endorsed RYA broking partner for over 40 years and currently arrange insurance cover for 85% of RYA clubs in the UK. We at Gallagher can provide bespoke insurance solutions to protect the specific demands and needs of your club. Risks include property, liability and boats, all placed via our RYA Club Combined package, now underwritten by Navigators in General, part of Zurich, alongside other key covers such as directors and officers liability, commercial legal expenses, cyber liability, engineering and much more. In addition to our competitive rating and breadth of policy, specifically designed for sailing clubs, recognised training centres and affiliated organisations, you will also receive automatic access to our Gallagher Health and Safety Click, which is an online risk management portal, Gallagher Business Assist, which provides you with access to a specialist loss assessor in the event of a large-scale property claim in excess of £10,000 in value, and an interest-free instalment plan, allowing you to spread the cost of your insurance over 12 equal monthly instalments at no extra charge. Whether you're an existing Gallagher customer or alternatively a club who doesn't currently insure with Gallagher and wish to know more, please do contact me at any stage using the contact details on screen.
Hi, my name's Jack, I'm 18 years old. So I tried to commit suicide, and due to that I was put in a psychiatric unit where I was there for 7 months. While I was there, I got the opportunity to come here to Hengistbury Head Centre and sail. It was great because once a week I could go out on either a rib or a dinghy, and I could forget that where I ended up, and I could just be free and enjoy myself for an hour or two. Once you get in a boat, you're fully involved in where that boat's going, what it's doing, and it just helps you take your mind off things. So like if you're having troubles with thoughts and things like that, it's really useful because it's just like freedom and it's like your responsibility. Before I went into hospital, I struggled with self-confidence, a goal of what to do, and was just really lost. I had little aim, I'd lost career motivation, and I just didn't really see a point. And I always found it was very difficult a lot of the time to find a reason to carry on. And it was just a constant battle of going from the next day to the next, just trying to keep myself going, because I just didn't see a point. So I've now been out of hospital 4 months and I am doing great. I've got a job and I've been doing up my boat ready for the sailing season, and I'm looking forward to getting into sailing. I'd say there's no harm in giving it a go, and I love it. It's such a release, and you get to just do what you want and not whatever like you're restricted to or whatever your mind is telling you. You can just be free.
The RYA Dinghy Show is going virtual. Join us from anywhere in the world on the 27th and 28th of February for 2 days packed with expert talks, sailing legends, interactive Q&A sessions and tips from sailors across the globe. We'll have awards, competitions and prizes, and exhibitors on hand to talk to you about the latest kit and equipment, and also offer exclusive show-only discounts and special offers. Keep the dinghy sailing and windsurfing community thriving and prepare for the season ahead by joining us for this fantastic event. And the best part is, it's absolutely free. Register now so you don't miss out on the biggest online sailing event of 2021. Just visit the show website to register today.
Welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed your cup of tea. It certainly feels slightly strange not being aware of that buzz of conversation you normally get in a tea break at a conference and just hearing how everybody's engaging. But it's great to see all of the comments come through on YouTube and Facebook, which is almost as good. So as promised, the next panel is all about sailors and their experience of 2020, as well as their thoughts about getting back on the water this year. I'm really grateful to David Durston for chairing this discussion, and to Ben, Kate, Anna and Kath for taking part. Do keep posting questions in the comments section, and over to you, David, and the panel.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. This is a panel to talk to people with with disabilities about how the year's affected you, really, with the whole COVID epidemic, and how it's affected your sailing and life generally over the year, and what you're looking forward to in the year to come, when hopefully things are a little bit better than they have been. Can I start by just getting you to do a brief introduction, just to say who you are, where you sail and what you sail? I'll start with Kathy.
Hi, my name's Kathy. I'm from the Midlands, and at the moment I'm just getting back in to sailing.
And what were you doing when you had a gap from sailing?
Not a lot. I do. No, I shouldn't say that. I actually do competitive wheelchair dancing.
Interesting.
So yeah, so there was a lot of training involved with wheelchair dancing and teaching, and I taught cadets as well, sea cadets.
Oh, I'd like to know more about the dancing. Okay, Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ben and I'm autistic. I sail at Oxford Sailability most of the time, and also a bit at Dorchester Sailing Club in Oxfordshire, not the city of Dorchester. Generally I sail a Hamster 2.3 at Sailability, and I also sail a variety of boats at my mainstream sailing club, such as a Laser 4.7 and Topper.
Thank you. Hannah, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Hannah. I sail at Bolton Sailability Group. I sail a Hansa 303 double-handed, and I've been sailing for forever now. I love sailing, especially competitive sailing, and my ambition would be to sail a variety of different boats, fast boats preferably, and I would like to experience offshore sea sailing, especially within tall ships.
Okay, great, thank you. And Kate?
I'm Kate, and I'm a member of Blind Sailing UK. So I have to travel distance sometimes to go to training when we can. And I love sailing that much that I'm willing to try any sort of size of a boat, anything from a dinghy right up to the tall ships. And it's just an amazing hobby to have.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go around each of you and find out a little bit about what sailing means to you. What do you get from sailing? So I'll go in a different order. Can I start with you, Ben? What does sailing give you?
Well, I think it's great fun. It's really fun, and when the wind is at the right speed, it can be very exciting. the main thing that sailing does for me is that, well, as my autism, I have very high anxiety, and sailing is what relieves my stress, and it gives me a focus, and I can almost just escape from the rest of the world and forget about my worries I'm having at that point for a few hours.
Thank you. What about you, Hannah? What do you get from sailing?
Well, sailing means to me everything. Before I started sailing, I was very depressed. So I didn't have any friends really. Didn't have any social life, any interest of my own. So it's given me all of those things. Because I'm very poorly sighted, the sailing has given me huge sensory experiences. I enjoy the movement of the boat, the wind, the physicality of having to move the boat, and I've built strength, and coordination's improved, and my sitting posture has improved. It's helped me in so many ways. I'm so grateful.
That's brilliant. Very interesting. Thank you. Where should we go now? Kate.
To me, I would say sailing to me is just such an enjoyable thing to do, whether it be at sea or on the water. It's a chance for me to hit that pause button and to sort of not forget that I am visually impaired, but I would say it's a break from how society perceives you, and it allows me to just feel the freedom, especially when I'm trying to helm a boat. I obviously I'm not allowed to drive a car, so it's to me it's the equivalent. And just the thrill of excitement and the independence it gives you is just I can't actually put it into words.
It's great. And how does it feel, being blind in a boat? You have to put a lot of trust in other people.
Yeah, you do actually, and trust is a very hard thing to to want to give to somebody in that sense. But because when I sail, I'm mostly with Blind Sailing UK's volunteers. That they're all amazing at what they do. They all give up their time, and you do just build up a bond with them. And even if you haven't met them before, you come back from being out on the water for, say, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, and it's like you've just got that unbreakable bond, really, and you do trust them, even if it does suddenly go a bit hairy and you almost capsize the boat.
Perfect. And last, I'm sorry, go Hannah.
I was going to say, I think as much as trusting other people, you learn to trust yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Kathy, what do you get out of sailing?
Yeah, from sailing, for me, it's freedom of movement. I'm actually more freer moving, or I feel more free moving when I'm in a boat rather than in my chair. I feel that having that wind element, you can control wind, and I'm a real thrill seeker. So being a thrill seeker, it means that I like the unpredictability of sailing, because I get a real big buzz out of that. Always was a thrill seeker before my accident and before my disability got the better of me. And it means that I can push my boundaries. I like pushing myself. I don't like to sit back and sort of think of myself as the poor disabled person. I like to keep up with the rest of the world. And when I'm in a boat, if people don't really know their boats, they don't really recognise the disability at all, because they're just seeing somebody sat down in a boat. So they don't see the wheels, and they see me, just me. But I really, really, really do just come to life when I'm sailing I'm a different person when I sail, a happier person. And I just can't wait for the next session of sailing to happen. So it's amazing. I hope I can sail, for as many more years as I can,
Yeah, I know where you're all coming from. I've had to shield for the last year, and sailing has been such a big part of my life.
Oxygen. So yeah, I know the feeling.
Last 15 years, and I really look forward to getting out there and racing. Love the competition and the experience, and I forget about all the pain and anything else from the outside world. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So how was last year for everybody else? How was 2020 with the pandemic? How did it affect your sailing activity? I'll start with Hannah.
Well, at Bolton, our sailors are the majority are in the extremely vulnerable category, and we also have all our volunteers are older, so it's affected our sailing greatly in that we couldn't really participate. Simply because the risk was just too big. So we haven't really sailed. We've really missed it. We do have a WhatsApp group that we keep in touch and try and communicate and share things as much as we can, but we have really missed the sailing.
Yeah. What about you, Kate?
I was actually very fortunate enough to be able to attend some limited training sessions on the water last year with blind sailing, and because we did go online for a lot of our learning, it enabled me to back up what I'd actually picked up, and it enabled me, I suppose it kind of helped me to really enjoy what I'd learned and feel the enthusiasm for sailing again. And actually last year I didn't realise until last year that I use sailing as therapy. Like you read a lot in books, and people say, oh yeah, it's therapy, and I was quite skeptic, and now I completely agree. It's just amazing to have the opportunity to go sailing whenever you can, really.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Kathy? How's your year been?
It was a good year and a sad year, really. I only restarted sailing last year in September, October, towards the end of the year. Once again, we're in very small amount of numbers because we have to be shielding. I should shield, and it was a case of drive straight to the reservoir, get out of my vehicle, straight on a boat, don't make contact with anybody. And although some people, I shouldn't have gone, I did go. It was a case of I just couldn't pass up the opportunity. But then after sort of 2 or 3 sessions, we've had to shut down. And although I've sailed before, getting that enthusiasm back at those first couple of sessions, and it really almost hitting me in the chest again with this, wow, you can do this still. The downside of, oh my goodness, I've got to stop it again. It really hit me hard, because I was suddenly discovering this new world again for me. Very much like Kate, we've now started online learning. We've got homework, as to say, sent back to us to learn, but so I'm refreshing bits that I know and making sure that I have got it right in my head, but it's still not the same as getting back on water and really feeling that vibe. I'm really missing it.
If I can add, one thing I am so grateful for is the community behind the club that I'm fortunate enough to be a member of. We had the training sessions, but we also had funny games evenings as well. And admittedly,
I think at the end of it, I ended up seeing them more than I ever used to, because we only ever used to really meet once a month in, you know, physically in to do training. And then I think at one point I was meeting at least 1 or 2 members, if not more, 4 times a week, because we'd started to do begin to sail courses for complete beginners. Obviously, you can't get them on the water, but you give them the basics over Zoom, and it was so fun, and it gave me something to focus on. So for that, I'm eternally thankful.
Yeah, we've been doing lots of virtual regatta stuff with the Hansa members, so that's been quite fun. As you say, I've seen them probably more often than I would otherwise have done. What about you, Ben? Have you been finding it with your anxiety and?
Well, 2020 was going to be the year I was going to take my GCSEs. And the other thing that's going to happen, well, the other thing that did happen was that I moved from a special school to a mainstream sixth form, which did happen. But my plan was that during the exam period, I would be sailing at the weekends as a bit of a de-stress of taking my mind off them almost. That doesn't matter as much because it didn't happen. The thing is with that is that sailing, as I said before, is my stress reliever, and we all know that lockdown was a very stressful time, and I didn't have that stress reliever because we couldn't sail, and that was very difficult for me because I couldn't access the thing that relieved my stress. After lockdown, for a few reasons, Oxford Sailability wasn't able to get back on the water. However, what we were able to do is that I was able to do more sailing with Dorchester Sailing Club, who are very helpful, very understanding of my needs, and very good at helping me access mainstream sailing through, even though I've got needs which are make it more difficult. And they were able to help me get back sailing there, and I had fun. They were able to help me to get to sail faster boats a few times, including the Laser 4.7 a few times, which is something I wasn't expecting, very exciting. I made a realisation over the summer, as I was doing more racing and race training, that the mainstream, my ability to race in the mainstream sailing setting is very limited, because the environment and the aggressive competitiveness of such events is just not accessible, and it's just too difficult for me to cope. While I am more confident that, even though I've done less racing with Sailability, that it's much easier to access from previous experience, and that will be much better for me in the long term. And if I raced in mainstream setting, it would take away the fun a bit, which would make it a bit worse for me.
Okay. Can I stay with you then, Ben, just to find out what are your aspirations for 2021? And as much as obviously it's very uncertain at the moment as to what 2021 is going to look like for most people, but what would you like it to look like? And have you got any concerns about what it might look like?
The thing is that last year I got my hopes up about it, and actually it came sort of crashing down a bit when I heard that Sailability wasn't coming back. So this year I don't want to get my hopes up about sailing Sailability. So I'll minimise the disappointment if it doesn't happen, and hopefully it'll be a lot more happy if it does. I'm relatively confident that I will be able to sail in some form, and I mean possibly a Sailability. But I'm unsure about that because it's very uncertain right now. If we are able to, and I still have the last year's plans and hopes that I made after last year's Sailability Awards, where I won the Sailability Sailor of the Year award. The main hopes for me are to sail faster boats than the Hansa 2.3, particularly the 2 ones which I've been hoping to sail for almost a year now are the Challenger and the 2.4 metre. And then the last thing that I'd like to hope to do would be to go on a Island Trust residential trip, which is on a tool ship, and that was postponed last year. The things Island Trust, they do tool ship trips out of Plymouth, and it was one of these trips with my special school a few years ago that actually got me into sailing in the first place, and I've never really looked back after that.
Okay, thank you. That's a very pragmatic approach to it. I think that's all we can do at the moment, isn't it? It's like we get what we get, so hopefully it will be good. Kathy, what about you? What are you hoping to do next year? This year?
Really hoping that they can stop doing shutdowns. So basically do as much sailing as I can if I round it right up to that, but splitting it down. I'd like to get to know the sailing club that I'm with, get to know everybody else, and see the sailability section of that grow, so that I get to meet more people, get more experiences, and able to exchange experiences with people, so that my love of sailing can get back to the level of what I used to have. As I've said, I've really found that the few sessions that I've got have given me this amazing thing of oh my goodness, I got on the boat and I could tack straight up the other end of the lake really easy. But getting into what boats I can properly sail, and finding which level is going to be a good level for me to sail at. My needs have changed so much in the last few years, that for me 2021 will be the year that I can find out what type of boat is going to suit me. And actually get to know other people in the realms of sailability, to also get that new friendship circle, and exchanging of knowledge.
Excellent. And Kate, what plans have they got for blind sailing in 21? Is there a full program?
Who knows, to be honest, at the moment. It's not that we don't want to go sailing, obviously, because we all do, but I think that as soon as we've given the green light, we can just go, because where we did the training last year, we had to put changes in place, but it proves that actually it works. But even though we did it only a few sessions, we adapted, and we actually had a lot more. It felt like we spent more time on the water actually, and we were able to really focus on one-to-one, develop individual development, which was amazing. And I'm really looking forward to kind of carrying on from last year, and also to go and meet people at Western Sailing Club, because as I said I wanted to join there last year, and obviously it hasn't happened yet, so I'm looking forward to trying to sail with a group that isn't specifically for people with disabilities.
And how about you, Hannah? What are you looking forward to this year?
Like I said, we hope the restrictions and the shutdowns will be lifted, but who knows? But I would like to do some competitive sailing if I could. I'd also like to expand on the sailing experiences and opportunities. I'd like to sail different boats, bigger boats, faster boats, tall ships. I really am looking to the future to broaden my sailing experiences and opportunities, and develop as a person in whatever way is possible. I'm open to anything, really, anything. I just want to get back on the water as soon as it's safe to do so.
Something I've really missed has been the travel this year, because we normally go to international competitions.
Yeah.
And in 2021, the World Championships are due to be taking place in Sicily, the Hansa World Championships in October. So I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to go on a road trip and get over there and compete, and also get some boats over there for other Hansa sailors to get over there and take part in it as well. So that's my big aim and hope for the year.
I really miss Rutland this year.
Yeah,
because Rutland was kind of where all the competitive sailing kind of first begun. So it always holds a special place in my heart, really.
Just in general, how would sort of, what does sailing give to you? Just to turn the question back on you. I'm just
Sailing,
intrigued to know.
really, it's given me a real sense of self-esteem and a sense of purpose as well, because before my injury, I was quite high up in a company, and I suppose when I had my accident, it really dents your confidence. You don't get seen the same once you're in a wheelchair. You don't get treated the same, and sailing has really enabled me to be included in the sailing community alongside able-bodied people in the main sailing club. I can compete alongside them on level terms. The boat is a great leveler. If you get a boat that works for you, then you can compete alongside everybody else. So I just find it's given me that sense of purpose, self-esteem, and confidence again. And it's a great community. I really like being part of the sailing community and the people with like-minded people. The trips that we go on as well, the travel. I get it's become a huge part of my life, and I've really missed it this year. Well, thank you all very much. That's very, very interesting to hear from you all, and everyone's got slightly different perspectives and different experiences, but it's interesting to hear what you all get out of the sport and how this year affected you. And fingers crossed, everything turns out better this year. We start to get back to some sort of normality and enjoy getting back to sailing again and seeing everybody. So thank you all.
That was a great discussion. Thank you to David and all of the panel. We did record that discussion about 10 days or so ago, and you have been putting questions to the panel, both in the lead up to the conference and also I can see in some of the comments. So I did manage to get one of those questions back to them, and they've given me their answers. So Kirsty Lydiard from Chesil Sailability asked, what measures or procedures would you like to see as a sailor, would you like to see in place which would enable you to feel safe in resuming sailing again this year? And some of the answers were just brilliant. So Ben talked about his anxiety again, and Ben said he's aware that he's not vulnerable or at risk from COVID in the way that many people are. He still worries about COVID for lots of reasons, particularly because he's involved in the care of his grandparents who are at the highest risk group. So he said, my response to your question is answered around the things that make me anxious, much of which is about needing to know that other people are following the rules. So some of his thoughts were, I would like people to wear masks and face coverings, unless they're exempt, of course. Even though wearing masks outside isn't compulsory, that would still give Ben a level of reassurance. And he said, I'd like to know that boats are disinfected between users and between sailors so that the equipment is clean. He said, I'd like to see hand sanitizer on the pontoon with a sign asking people to use it and not rely on people bringing their own, because then Ben, I would know, as Ben said, I would know that people are using it because it's there and it's visible and there's a sign. Ben said, I worry about the space on the pontoons and distancing. Doesn't always have a solution to that, but that's a concern, that space on the pontoon and distancing. And he said, interestingly, he said, not really connected to the question, but I wondered if some groups who are able to go sailing, there'd be some sort of system where they could allow sailors from other groups who are not able to get back on the water yet to join, so everybody gets as many opportunities as possible. And as you could hear there, Kate talked about some of her experience with blind sailing last year. So actually, they learnt a lot from some of the procedures that worked. They had one-to-one support bubbles on the water, so they kind of limited the number of people you had contact with, so that was an important part of it. And David talked about the procedures what procedures will be in place to ensure social distancing by volunteers and all the other sailors. He wants to know that. He wants to know how numbers are being controlled. He wants to know how safety measures are being maintained on the water and not compromised in any way. And information about what facilities can I use and how will their cleanliness be ensured. So it's not just the stuff that happens on the water, it's the stuff that happens on the shore as well. And how is it going to impact on the experience of going sailing, the social side? Will I be able to go racing? All those sorts of things again. So he wants to know all of that. And ultimately, I guess, David, like everyone else, has got that decision. Is the risk worth the reward? So that was a great question. I'd love to thank all of the panelists, Kathy, Katie, Hannah and Ben, particularly Dave Durston for chairing it. And thank you to Stephen and Helen and Richard and Liddy, Frank for the earlier discussion. And of course to Rick for bringing Tanny to our world and lighting up our conference with such a great presentation. We've had a huge amount of questions and comments leading up to and during the event and during in the comments on Facebook as well. And the format perhaps makes it hard to respond to everyone, but we will do our best. We will work through what you said. We will come back to you. Please do contact us if you've got any more questions or you want any more information after the day. But perhaps I can focus on a couple of the questions that I have seen coming through. It's certainly I've seen questions about restarting, and of course we've got a session next Friday about restarting sailing, so do join Brett, Steve Mitchell and a few others from the organisation about looking at restarting in detail. I've seen questions about mixed household sailing and in a variety of different vessels, and I've seen questions about using hoists. And I guess, Tanny started to give us the answer, and then the organisation's panel and the sailors began to build on that answer a little bit more. Yes, there are lots of mitigations we can put in place, and we know that they've worked both through the sailability activity that happened last year and the wider sailing community. And that's about face coverings. It's about avoiding face-to-face contact. It's about limiting the number of contacts and limiting the duration of contact that people will have. But as we built on today, it is about talking it through. So make sure everybody understands what those mitigations and controls are, talk it through, come up with a plan, and decide if all of the people involved, and that's the sailors and the volunteers, are happy with that plan. And if people are, then it may be okay for that activity to happen. And if people aren't happy, you need to go back to the drawing board and do that plan again. So I think that there aren't any simple answers that are going to work for everybody, but I think that process is going to be really, really, really important and should see us back on water. And when I looked at, lots of the comments you've been making today and lots of the comments that we saw as you booked for this conference, it's really clear that people are thinking very hard about how do we stay COVID secure? How do we run activity in a way that is COVID secure? What will the guidance be? Can we keep up with all of the changes? How can we operate? Is social distancing going to be possible? The challenges that we've just talked about 2 or more people in 2 or more handed boats and having multiple people in boats. Will our activities going to be implicated in virus transmission? All of those are genuine concerns. And lots of you are worried about the level of activity that's going to be possible next year. There is a fear that maybe we won't be able to operate, or there won't be enough sailing, or we'll start later on in the season. We won't be allowed to meet, and then the social side of it is as important as much as everything. And yes, there's a huge amount of optimism about the vaccination program and the opportunities that's going to free up. As Tanny said, we're going to be living with this virus for a while yet, so we have to make sure all those other mitigations are in place as well. And increasingly, I think sailing clubs and sailability groups and clubs and centres are aware of the ever increasing pressure on funding and the ability to raise funding, particularly when activity is limited, both for clubs and centres, but also to the organisations who come sailing with us. How viable in the long term are clubs and centres going to be? So that those kind of long-term issues are, we haven't seen the full economic effect of this pandemic yet, and so that is definitely a concern. And then, as we've heard throughout today, that kind of confidence and reassurance piece. Will sailors come back? Can we retain and motivate our volunteers? What reassurance do people need that it's going to be safe to return? Will people lose interest? Will they lose their confidence? Will they lose their skills? You guys know all of these questions. You're asking all the right questions. It's now about time to start talking to each other and coming up with some of the answers so we can restart and rebuild. You know, and as Tanny said, it's about asking. It's about not being silly and you know, making sure people are following the rules. It's about asking what the plan should be and providing reassurance and tuning into people's anxieties. So I guess, you know, that is the biggest question, isn't it? Whether to restart activity or not. And unfortunately, it's one individual organisations are going to have to make themselves. We will do our best to offer you all the guidance and advice that we can. As we've said a few times, organised outdoor sport and activity for disabled people is possible today under the current regulations. And we know 1 or 2 groups who have been exploring getting people on the water. And Sport England were really clear that one of the reasons they advocated with government for having that ability to do organised outdoor sport for disabled people in the current lockdown was because not allowing it would have had a disproportionate impact on disabled people. And it's definitely possible that outdoor sport and activity will be one of the first things to open up post this lockdown. We wait and see, and we've been surprised many times, but that's certainly possible. So yes, I do think we should be absolutely determined to put our best efforts to restarting sailability activity. But you will decide when that's right for you, and we'll do whatever we can to support. You know, our priority this year is absolutely to recover the sport, to restart and rebuild activity and opportunities for disabled people on the water. That means a number of projects and themes and activities for us. So the More Than Sailing campaign has been ticking along for a couple of years. We've given lots of support to we've provided the templates for everyone to use the campaign. We've provided some in-depth support to about 20 groups now. But we recognise that there's more we need to do at the national level. So we're currently working with an agency to plan the More Than Sailing campaign this summer, so we can be much more proactive about regular communication and regular awareness raising as part of the campaign. So we're going to be doing much more to highlight the benefits and the opportunities for disabled people to get on the water. Absolutely, in the beginning of that will be about providing the reassurance we've talked about throughout this conference. And as things become clearer and easier, it will be about persuading new people back. We are looking for a communication professional at the moment to work 1 day a week with us on this campaign to deliver the campaign that the agency planned for us. That job is currently live on the RYA website. Do have a look if you're interested and you've got that communication experience and or you've got that lived experience of disability. And please do let your networks know, tell everybody about that job. It's a really exciting opportunity. So do have a look at that. As you're probably aware, we've been monitoring the feasibility of this year's multi-class regatta. It was due in June, which is very close now. And we've still got no clarity yet on what would be possible for an event of that size with such large numbers and with the complexity that comes with it. And as we've said a few times, our priority is on restarting activity locally, giving people the opportunity to get back on the water where they can. So we have decided to cancel the regatta, but we will be launching a national challenge to encourage people back on the water as wherever and as when that's possible. And we will be working with the class associations and some others to make sure there are some great competitive opportunities out there and for the community to come together in the way that that multi-class provides. So look out for that. And by not having the multi-class, we've freed up some time and we've freed up some budget. So we will be working with our partners, the local and national organisations who can help us reach disabled people who may want to go boating. Perhaps the start point is to build up a picture of how far our links go locally and how we can maximise those opportunities. So we'll definitely be investing in our partners. More than anything, we'll be investing in people, because without volunteers, without staff, we won't be able to restart activity. So time will be spent helping you reassure when it's okay to return and making sure you and your volunteers and your sailor skills and knowledge are up to date. So that kind of investing in people piece will be really important. And we'll be focusing on safety because it underpins everything that we do. More resources, more learning, more sharing of practice. And we're going to explore the feasibility of a service that gives you an independent, critical friend look at your safety systems. So watch the space for that. Development sessions we're running over the next 2 weeks. We'll touch on lots of these themes and many more as well. If you signed up to them, you're going to get an email in the next day or so with your joining details. But we look forward to seeing you for an in-depth look at volunteering, at club development, at restarting activity, Some great sessions from Sense on complex communication. We're looking at safety management systems over a couple of weeks. We're looking at running engaging sessions on the water, and we're looking at improving your sailing. So do join us for those sessions. We're really looking forward to seeing you and having a slightly more in-depth conversation than has been possible today. Of course, like lots of organisations, the RYA's had a difficult year as well. What was really encouraging in this lead up to this conference, 2/3 of you told us that you're already members of the RYA, and that makes you an exceptional audience. You're exactly the kinds of people who'd want to support the work of the RYA, and I hope you benefit from the work that we do. It has been a tough year, and it's been a tough year for RYA membership and RYA members. I'd like to think we've been there for each other, and we would appreciate your help. More sailors and volunteers who join the RYA, the quicker we can grow back membership to those pre-COVID levels, making us stronger and ultimately better able to continue to help clubs and centres get more disabled people involved in boating. So make sure you rejoin the RYA. Do tell your friends about the benefits of being a member of the RYA, and let's see if we can recover that membership as well. There's a huge amount coming up in the next few months, all of it virtual at the moment. On the 27th and 28th of February, we've already seen the video, but we have got the dinghy show, some fantastic content from some great sailors from sailing every type of vessel. So the usual engaging, really interesting and content that massively improves our knowledge. So do come along to the dinghy show. We've got instructor training days on the 13th of March. This will be a virtual day in the first place, and then when face-to-face activity is possible again, there might be some regional events happening linked to that. Do sign up for the instructor training day on the 13th of March. And actually, for the first time, the RYA is running a cruising conference on the 21st of March. So do sign up for that if you want to explore new types of boating for you. And finally, some thank yous from me. A massive thank you to Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson for her brilliant keynote and for giving up her time on a Saturday morning. And Rick, thank you so much for asking her in the first place. It was brilliant to be able to get her along, and you were instrumental in that. Thank you to everybody who's been involved in the discussion panels. It was brilliant working with you and thinking about the questions and really insightful hearing your discussions. But particularly thank you to Frank Fletcher and Dave Durston, who chaired them so brilliantly. Thank you to Brett, Sarah, Leon, James and Jane, who are running the sessions in the next week or two, who've been responding to comments and keeping things going in the background today. And to all of the presenters that they've roped in for the sessions in the next couple of weeks. Massive support, so thank you for that. Thank you to Sport England and Gallagher. Your ongoing support. Events like this wouldn't be possible, so we really appreciate working with you. Thanks to VoiceBox for providing the subtitles on our website. It's been a really important way of making sure the content gets out to as many people as possible, so thank you to them. Thanks to Tom and James from our digital and video team for producing the event for us. They've been pressing all the buttons in the background and making sure we're live at the right times and microphones are switched on, and so thank you for that. Most of all, a massive thank you to Melissa, who behind the scenes makes all this event happen. She organises it, she sorts out all the logistics, she responds to everybody's emails. She's brilliant at doing it, so thank you, Melissa. And most of all, thank you to all of you for joining in such great numbers. It's been brilliant to see you. It's been a shame we can't do it in person, but fantastic that we've been able to do it virtually. Thank you for being so engaged this morning and all your comments. We will do our best to get back to you all on most of it. Most of all, thank you for your support in making Sailability happen, and for all that you're going to do in 2021. Yeah, looking forward to working with you all. So please do stay safe, and we will all see you soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.